This is a production of WKNO Memphis. Production funding for this program is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
It's not every day we get to sit down with someone who's been associated with an Academy Award-winning film. He's the undefeated coach, he's a philanthropist, he's an author of Against the Grain, he's an entrepreneur, business owner, we could go on and on and on. He's a change maker. It's time for a conversation with Bill Courtney. So let's start. You are from Memphis, you're a Memphian. Let's start with a little bit of your childhood. Give us some context. Is growing up here in Memphis, what was it like? What was your childhood like?
I grew up Park and Colonial area, so I'm a native Memphian. Skinned my knees at Marquette Park growing up. Used to ride my bike up there. Had a Memphis Press Cemetery route. Actually through Gibson's Donuts was on my route. So that's kind of
not a bad route.
Not at all. And the guy there was really nice. He'd give me a free donut every once in a while, which you can see maybe he shouldn't have. Yeah, so that's where I grew up. I went to school here, graduated from Ole Miss, and came back here. I'm a Memphis guy.
And you lettered in 6 sports, correct?
I did. I lettered in 6 sports in high school: football, basketball, baseball, golf, tennis, and soccer. I don't really think I was very good at. I was a triathlete. I'd try anything. So yeah, but I did. I lettered in 6 sports and had a lot of fun doing it.
And when you went to Ole Miss, you went there. You had other opportunities to play football, but you wanted to choose an SEC school, a big school.
Yeah, I had an academic scholarship to Ole Miss, and I had some small offers at some small schools. I was a pretty decent high school ball player, and I thought, well, I want to go play big ball, and I got this scholarship. So I talked to Coach Brewer, and he said, sure, walk on. It didn't cost him anything because I had an academic scholarship. And very shortly after arriving, I recognized that God blessed me with lots of things, and one of them was SEC limitations. So that was the end of that.
What I think is pretty cool of your story, though, is you ended up doing soccer, too, though.
Well, the soccer, I don't know, some guy, I can't even remember who it was, but I think their goalie got hurt, and then their second string goalie, like 2 days later, got hurt, and they needed somebody that could play, and I ended up playing 3 years of soccer at Ole Miss. Yeah.
So one of the things that stands out, though, is Sigma Nu. Talk about Sigma Nu, but how that ties to this huge bowl game that gives back, the Charity Bowl.
Well, I pledged Sigma Nu, and I didn't know anything about that either, except that I wanted to be in a fraternity that cared about stuff other than just drinking beer, and not that part of fraternity life at Ole Miss isn't fun, but wanted to have something else. And Chucky Mullins got hurt, as we all know that story, which chronicled in Against the Grain pretty in depth. And there's the same kid named Alan Moore in Lauderdale County. And the same year Chucky got hurt with a very similar injury. And all of this outpouring of money and love and affection and help from the university and the state and really the country pouring into Chucky so that he could survive and have some semblance of life, and the university bought him a house and all the things that they rightly should do. And here, an hour and a half south of Oxford, was a kid with the exact same injury and the exact same situation with nothing, didn't even have a wheelchair. So we started this football game called the Charity Bowl, which is my fraternity plays a football game against another fraternity. We raise money and ticket sales. The fraternity's got to put up some money. And that first year, I think we raised about $15,000 for Alan Moore. And we called it the Charity Bowl. And it was always played for someone with an injury like Chucky's. And we donated the money in honor of Chucky. And actually, that thing's continued on, and it's still played. It'll be played this year. And I think the fraternity's raised over $1,500,000 since, I think that was 90. or 89.
It's telling me to think that's a huge part of your legacy, because you were a part of founding that and establishing that, and all of a sudden you look at 30 years later and it's still in motion, and millions of dollars, over $1 million raised.
Yeah, $1.5 million. It's the largest Greek philanthropy project in the United States, and I am, I don't want to sit here and break my arm, pat myself on the back. I'm a failed human being like all of us, but I am extraordinarily proud of. I guess I'm really proud of the fraternity for continuing that, and that I do get to call that a small part of my legacy, I guess. Yeah.
So when you look at then transitioning from college out, as I alluded to, you're an entrepreneur, you had some different jobs, but ultimately on your couch, basically, you start Classic American Hardwoods. So tell a little bit of that story of founding this business.
I coached football and taught school for a living, and that's all I ever really wanted to do. But I got married, and we had 4 children in 4 years. So when my children were 4, 3, 2, and 1, we got on city water, and that cleared up. But nonetheless, I had these kids, and I couldn't make it on a coach's income. Bounced around some different jobs and ended up starting a company called Classic American Hardwoods in 2001, kind of on a wing and a prayer. And today, it's a $50 million business that employs about 130 people. We've got our manufacturing facility and domestic sales offices here in Memphis, and international offices in Surabaya, Indonesia, Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, and Shanghai, China.
And a lot of that story is chronicled in the book, Against the Grain. One of the things that to me really stands out, though, is you always consider yourself a coach first and foremost. And that's a coach not only in sports, which we'll talk about that in a second, but a coach in life, a coach in business. And when you look at your legacy, as we alluded to, you lettered in 6 sports, but you didn't really have a father figure. Coaches played that role in many cases. Describe kind of that side of just your upbringing and with your mom and her mother.
My father left home when I was 4, and one of my mom's husbands shot at me down a hallway with a .38 caliber pistol. I had to dive out a window to avoid dying that night. He also shot at my mom. So needless to say, I didn't have the typical organic family upbringing. However, I played every sport imaginable ever since 2nd grade. And, I had, I had a maternal and paternal grandfather that were loving and involved, but I think I drew, how I started my business and how I coached at Manassas and how I wrote that book and all of that, little bits and pieces from all of the coaches that I played for. And so I wouldn't say I'm exactly like any of them, but I'd say pieces of me or exactly like pieces of all of them. And I really think that's really what we are as human beings is we're a culmination of the bits and pieces that we learn from the most influential people in our lives. And that happens to suit me best as a coach.
Talk about one of the coaches had a mantra, so to speak, about being responsible. It's a responsibility because of the blessings to be able to give back.
Yeah, it's Albert Pike is a 19th century Freemason, and he said, "What you do for yourself in this world dies with you. What you do for another lives forever and remains immortal." And I travel in business I travel all over Eastern Europe, travel Southeast Asia, and we largely in this country don't understand what real poverty is. I'm talking about dirt floors, no food, living in garbage heaps to try to find just the basic sustenance of life. We are so richly blessed in this country. So just to be in this country is a blessing. And we have riches and wealth that even probably some of the neediest among us in this country don't even understand how bad it is elsewhere. That's why people flood across borders to get here. And then to be like guys like you and me, who are even some of the more blessed of a blessed society. I mean, it's phenomenal what we have. And I was taught by a coach that it's not a nice thing to do to give back. it's a responsibility. It's a responsibility of those blessings to pass on to the neediest among us. And your society is only as strong as the weakest among it. So in giving back to the neediest among society, we actually make ourselves stronger.
So let's transition that. That's a perfect segue to your coaching at Manassas. And it was a friend / coworker / somebody you went to Ole Miss with, who was in Sigma Nu with you, fraternity brothers, so all the way through and through. But describe how you got into coaching at Manassas.
Well, again, I'd coached for a living. I coached, and I never quit coaching. Then I started my business in 2001, and I had to pour myself into that. So even as a non-faculty coach, I just quit coaching for a couple of years, and I missed it a lot. And
well, if it's in your blood, it's in your blood. Right?
You're in your blood, right? So a friend of mine named Jim Tipton, who was a fraternity brother and a friend at Ole Miss, who ended up coming in to work for my company as a sales guy and still there. His Sunday school class had some guys that were cooking pre-game meals at Kingsbury. And he thought that was a neat idea. So he asked me, he said, hey, if I take some Fridays off and get involved. And I said, yeah, I think that's awesome. And he said, where should I go? And I said, man, I don't know, but there's this high school about a mile from the plant, across the street from the post office. I think it's called Manassas. So Jim goes to Manassas, walks in and says, hey, how can I help? He wasn't invited. There wasn't a sign outside that said volunteers needed. I get asked all the time, how do you start? Well, here's how you start. Go start.
Yeah, just knock on the door.
Just knock on the door. I'm here. I can help. I'd like to. And that's exactly what he did. And it was baseball season, and he got involved with the baseball team. They didn't have caps, and he bought baseball caps. And spring practice was starting, and they had 17 kids out there. And he came back after 3 or 4 weeks at Manassas and said, Bill, he said, man, they only got 17 kids, and they've only won like 4 or 5 games in the last 10 years. They're awful. He said, but I'm telling you, they got some cats out there that look like they could play. And they got a coach, Danny Poe, great guy, doing everything he could, but he's one guy. And he was underfunded, just nothing. And he said, they'd love for you to help at spring practice and put in an offense or something. So I literally went to Manassas because Jim went first and brought me with him. And my whole goal was to stay 2 weeks, install an offense, and be done. And
7 years later.
That turned into 7 years. Turned into 7 years.
So,
sure did.
We can see it all unfold, or I shouldn't say unfold, because most of the groundwork was laid years ahead of time before Undefeated was even captured. But talk about, because you jump in feet first, and all of a sudden, like anything, you jump in with the heart in the right place, wanting to make a difference, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh my goodness, what have I gotten myself into? And you start falling in love with the kids.
That's the truth. You do look up and say, holy smokes, what have I done here? What am I doing? I mean,
but talk about that aspect, because
when
these kids,
you find out how insignificant and ill-equipped you really are. Oftentimes when you go into an area or a place or a discipline that needs help, they don't need you if things are going beautifully, right? So you should know, which I, in my ignorance and probably my ego didn't, I coach football, I'll go in and help out. But you're so, I felt so overwhelmed and unequipped to deal with. It wasn't just football. It was character, it was commitment, it was integrity. It was all of the fundamental tenets that we need a life with were just so absent and untaught. And on top of that, a socioeconomic reality that even though I didn't grow up with a lot, I didn't truly understand, and certainly a racial issue that I had a lot to learn about. And, I think that's what the payoff is, though, is what I garnered out of everything that we did at Manassas and my growth as a human being and what I learned because of what that experience taught me. I mean, it is very much a give and take thing, but yeah, you go in and sometimes you look around and say, what in the world have I gotten myself into? And, that's when you make a choice. Either you dig your heels in and do what you came to do, or you bolt.
Well, and I know that one of the pivotal moments on your end, you learned a lot of vernacular, but one was turkey person.
Yeah,
and I think this is an important lesson. Talk about
it was not just
person.
an important lesson. I will tell you, it's probably one of my top 5 life lessons. My first year, We were 3-3 midway through the season, and I think 3-3 is pretty average. But when you've won 4 games in 10 years, 3-3 in one season is pretty good. Yeah, we're a little past halfway through. Early on, Jim and I and some of the other coaches started recognizing that we got to coach stuff other than football here. Commitment, integrity, the dignity of hard work. I mean, things we take, showing up on time, for goodness sake, all of it. So we started coaching life lessons as well as football, which ultimately is what you're there to do anyway, is to reach these kids' heart through something they love. And so we start coaching that stuff. And halfway through the season, we're 3-3, and you know, the whole team was buying into the football. They were like, we're winning some games, we got some new equipment, and very respectful. The kids were always much more respectful than what I would have thought going into an environment like that, which tells you about my inaccurate, predisposed notions that are often the types of things that keep us from going to places we need to go, which is another lesson I learned. But they were very respectful, and yes or no, sir. But the minute football was over, half the team was buying into the important stuff. You know, the other half the team are respectful on the football field. They were back in the streets, not doing homework. It was driving me crazy. So I went to my guy. Every coach has a guy. Went to my guy and I said, Bo, what do I got to do to get that half of the team to buy into the important stuff like your half of the team? And Bo and I had some very real, out of the comfort zone talks about race and creed and socioeconomics. We had real talks. And so I expected Bo to tell me what was up. And Bo said, coach, just keep doing what you're doing. You know, dismissively. Mm-hmm. If you have kids, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Yes, sir. Just doing what you're doing. He didn't want to talk about it. I said, Bo, no, come on, man. What's up? Why can't I get that half the team to buy in like your half the team to the important stuff? He said, Coach, I don't want to hurt your feelings. I said, you're not going to hurt my feelings. He said, all right, Coach. They're trying to figure out if you're a turkey person or not. I had no idea what he was talking about. What are we talking about? He said, Coach, every Thanksgiving and Christmas, people roll into our neighborhood and they give us hams and turkeys and gifts, and we take them because we ain't got none. But then they leave and we never see them again. And it makes you wonder if they're doing that because they really care about us or they're doing that to make themselves feel good. And he looked me dead in the eyes. He said, what the hell are you doing here, Coach? I got to say something. If you're volunteering a soup kitchen or you're taking your family time on Thanksgiving or Christmas or the holidays to deliver goods to needy, it is not a bad thing. And that's not what this story is to illustrate. What the story is to illustrate is, what is your motive? Because if you are looking to lead and to work and to help in an area that needs it, and your motives are not right, people will take what you have to give, but they're learning nothing from you. And that's what was being questioned, was my motive. And the truth is, my motives weren't exactly right. I was digging people kind of patting me on the back saying, what a great thing you're doing at Manassas and all of that. We were at dinner about 2 weeks after that conversation, and we were talking football, and my youngest son looked at me and says, Dad, I got a question. I said, sure. He said, I know everything you're doing at Manassas, but what are your players' names? And it dawned on me, man. I mean, every time I was asked about Manassas, I was telling them everything I was doing. But I wasn't talking about this amazing work these kids were doing. They were the ones doing the work. I was just along for the ride and helping be a conduit. And I immediately changed the I conversation. And the greatest leaders of our time always give credit to the followers when things are going well and take blame when things are going wrong. That's what a leader's got to do. And so I started giving credit to the followers. I started giving credit to the kids about what they were doing. And if anything went wrong, that was on me because I was the coach. And I'm telling you, in a matter of months, the entire attitude of the team changed, and they did start buying the important stuff. And that's what led to 7 years of growth, from 17 kids to 70 kids on the team, and what grew from 4 wins in 10 years to a record of 18-2 over our last 2 years. And it started with Bobo teaching me that my motives had to be right, or else I would be viewed as a turkey person.
And I know you still keep in touch with many of those players. Describe, I mean, obviously some have great success stories, some not so much, but give us 1 or 2 success stories in there.
I mean, you got to remember, if you're thinking about the movie, over the course of 6.5 years with players, I mean, there's 300 players, and trust me, there's a story under every single helmet, all right? But you can't make a movie about 300 people. So the movie focuses on 3 guys, but there's a much broader view of the kids at Manassas than just those 3 guys. And, you know, Chavis, one from the movie that, if you've seen the movie, you know, Chavis graduated from college and he was in jail his sophomore year. So that's a great story. 2 kids you didn't see in the movie that played on that same team, Dexter and Dante, are graduating from Murray State, or just graduated from Murray State, and are now serving our country in the military. There's tons of amazing stories. There's also some heartbreaking ones. And you have to be fundamentally ready to understand when you go into a tough situation to do some work that there are going to be a lot of losses.
Right.
But you mourn the losses, but you recognize they're going to happen, and you celebrate all the wins that maybe would not have happened had you not made the effort. So I'm certainly sorrowful of some of the things that didn't go as well with some of the kids that I'd hoped, but I choose to accept that that's just part of what it is and celebrate the successes.
I love the fact that you talk a lot, you know, when you're out public speaking of, you know, many people make the decisions where they draw the lines and they're, you know, here's the good, here's the bad. And he's like,
Thomas Jefferson.
And if you make the decision based on the bad, you would never do half the stuff. But when you focus on the people, the relationships, the good things that will happen, then that's where the beauty and the magic really takes place. And so you weren't focused on all the bad things, you were focused on what could be the good. And it may only be a few, but the handful of the good things really blossom into this amazing journey. So,
and you got to put yourself on the good thing, because I can't say it strongly enough. What you get out of it comes back 50 times what you put into it.
Right.
If you're willing to be, you know, we got to drop the political correctness. If we're willing to have open, non-threatening, but civil conversations about race and politics and creed, about the stuff that matters, it is phenomenal, the common ground that exists, and it's phenomenal the growth that can exist. But you first have to have 2 groups of people willing to put all that crap aside, not worry about being politically correct, and just have real talk. But when real talk happens and real action happens, real change happens.
And that's actually a big part of this book. Is I know you turned down bigger sums of money to write a more watered down version of this, and
That's
you said,
right.
no, if I'm going to do this, I want to do it my way. I want to tell my story, but in a way that can be against the grain, a little rough on the edges, but it prompts you to think about things.
That was my whole. What's the point in
purpose.
sitting down for 2 years and writing a book that's all fluffy and goofy? There's too many of that. I wanted to write about. You know what the biggest compliment I have about that book is I have had numerous people, including my publisher, tell me that they can't figure out if I'm Republican or Democrat or right or left or progressive or conservative. They can't figure out really where I align politically and socioeconomically. And you know what? Good. Because here's the truth. Both sides have some things pretty screwed up, and both sides have some things pretty right. If we would quit digging in and getting entrenched according to ideology and throw that out, and let's just do things that make sense. Let's go against the grain of what the pundits and political correctness tells us, and let's just look at things for what they are and employ some good old-fashioned common sense, all the while tending to the tenets of integrity and decency and civility and character. Let's employ those tenets over the top of some common sense solutions, and it's phenomenal what can happen. Like a team at Manassas who nobody even thought would ever win a football game, doing what they've done, and like a business starting from my couch in 2001, now employing 100 people. And that all of those things happen when you put aside the stupidity and just do common sense stuff founded in very basic fundamental tenets.
So as we wrap up, you've done amazing things. You've been on the red carpet, the Academy Awards. You've been hanging out with celebrities. Serena Williams, I know, is one of your wife's favorites, and you know, getting to squeeze her arm muscles and say she's got big muscles. You know, hanging out with celebrities, Pete Carroll, voice of Madden, all these amazing things. We'll save that for another day. But give me one tip, bit of advice for someone that says, I want to make a difference, I want to get involved. What would you tell somebody? Obviously check out the book, obviously do what Jim did and just knock on the door, but what would be something that you would say, here's an easy way to start your legacy?
When you're on 240 North and you go over Warford or Smith Street, or you're on the South and you go over Mill Branch, and you look over the edge of that viaduct, and you see the abject poverty and loss and disenfranchisement and despair, and you think to yourself, man, somebody ought to do something about that. And then as you pass over that viaduct, the one that you don't want to have the flat tire on, and you look in the rearview mirror and you think again, man, somebody ought to do something about that. I suggest to you, instead of looking in the rearview mirror, cock that thing about 15 degrees. Who is somebody? The government has proven woefully inadequate in caring for the neediest among us. It's become this big bureaucratic mess. Who is somebody? Is somebody else supposed to come along and do something? We are blessed. We have the power and we have all we need to help. It's just a matter of looking ourselves in the mirror and recognizing the responsibility to do so. So my advice is quit thinking somebody ought to do something, because somebody is you.
And that is the perfect way to end. So make sure, check out, the book is Against the Grain. You can watch Undefeated. All easy ways to see the difference that this man makes. Bill Courtney, thanks for all you do, for coming on the show. Greatly appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.